पॉलिसी बाजार पर 1 करोड़ रुपए का टर्म लाइफ इंश्योरेंस केवल 450 रुपए महीने से शुरू। वाह!
Good evening, welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I am Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, a two-parter it's a one-hour program today. In just a few minutes, all the key details that you need to know about the new nasal vaccine, booster shots going forward. Dr. N.K. Arora, who heads the COVID working group, joins us at a time when the disease seems to be out of control in China, even though China has now opened up air travel, which means no seal control of COVID-19 cases, no demarcation of high-risk areas, outbound tourism to resume gradually, among other steps. What does all of this, the outbreak of COVID in China, mean for us in India? Should we really be worried? And if we are just a little bit worried, because we don't need to panic, what are the steps we need to take? And particularly when it comes to booster doses. At 1:30, the latest hate speech by the BJP leader Pragya Thakur, who urges the gathering to at least keep a sharp kitchen knife to cut throats and the heads of those indulging in love jihad. On the show, why is a free run given to a hate monger? But first, the very latest on the COVID situation in India, indeed what we are seeing in China as well. What are some of the key beliefs right now in India? Dr. N.K. Arora, the head of the COVID working group, chairman of the COVID working group of NTAGI, which is the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, joins us. Thanks very much, Dr. Arora, for being with us. The bottom line over here, is India likely to face the threat in terms of numbers which we are seeing in China now?
Thank you, Vishnu, for inviting me. Your first question is very important, and the response we are seeing in this country, which is a very preemptive and a proactive response, is primarily because there is huge opacity of what is happening in China. Opacity in terms of the cases which are occurring, the severity of cases, their vaccination status, and then the kind of variants, Omicron variants or the other variants which are circulating there. So this has led to the country and the whole COVID working group going in for a whole process of activating, so that at the last moment, or there should not be a moment where we scramble for our preparedness. And so all this activity which we are going in. Having said that, I would say there is no need to panic, because on one side is the preparation, but the most important thing is our genomic surveillance. Our surveillance is at the top of the whole activity, and we are seeing various subvariants which are circulating in India, and we find whatever filtered information we are getting, we need not be worried, because most of these which are reported from China have also been isolated.
But Dr. Arora, I think the question is this: given the fact that the information coming out of China is minuscule, is it your concern, as somebody who's really been studying this, that the primary variant of concern in China now is something we know very little about? It may not be the BA5 or BA7 or their sublineages. It could be something else.
So, in fact, just 48 hours ago, one of the international websites reported the prevalent variants which are causing the outbreak in China. And what we find is that it's a mixture.
I see.
And BF7 is only minuscule, only about 10 to 15%. Actually, there are two important series, BN series and BQ series. These together constitute about 50% of the isolates which are reported in that, which is called GISAT website. And then there is a small number of XBB, which
right.
is in fact the dominant way. XBB is about 10 to 15%. So overall, BF7 is not something which everybody is talking about. No, there is a mixture of various variants, and the variable proportion like we see, and almost all of these in some measure or the other, particularly I must say BF7 is minuscule, only 4 isolates so far. since July. And then BN1 and BQ1 is also there, but they are also not too much, less than 2 or 3%. But the major thing which we are in India are seeing is XBV, which is about 70% of all the isolates we are getting on week-to-week basis for last.
And how dangerous is this, sir?
I see, for these variants behave differently according to local epidemiology.
Right.
And so in China today it is causing havoc because they are like naive. They have not been exposed to the virus before. The second equally important is that the vaccine which they got probably was not as effective. And I must tell you, most of them have got 3 doses or 4 doses of their own Chinese vaccines. Still, they are having this kind of very severe outbreak. While in India, we have the benefit of 3 things. One is that throughout first wave, second wave, and third wave, there has been exposure to natural infection. And the most recent, there is a very recent data which shows that in children below 12 years, where vaccine is not given, 95-96% of children are positive for COVID exposure. Second, that 92 to 97% of our children, individuals between 12 to rest of the age, have got at least 2 primary doses. So this gives us a very nice hybrid immunity. And many of us have also suffered, I'm sure, many of you within your close contacts also, more than one infection also. Yes. Positive infection. So
no, and Dr. Arora, I must tell you right now, this must be at least the 20th interview that we've done over the last couple of years. And I disagreed with you on herd immunity or natural immunity, but it appears that the lack of this in China, according to scientists, is a major contributory factor towards the illness spreading in that country. In other words, herd immunity or natural immunity is a big factor when it works alongside vaccines. I think this is a big learning tool for a lot of us, and indeed for scientists. I'm just a journalist. A lot of scientists around the world as well.
So I would refrain from the word herd immunity. No, herd immunity is a very complicated issue. I think we should refrain from. It is hybrid immunity. That natural infection, and on top of that, which has been supplemented with vaccination. When these two occur, and I must tell you, in 2 of our Indian states, which initially behaved, they had very strict lockdown and containment policies. And if you remember, in the second wave, for a long time, these 2 states continued to have a wave.
So Maharashtra and which other states are Kerala, right?
Kerala. So this is, so our own experience shows, so it was not something which it was like in a natural experiment which happened. And here in China, we are seeing actual what happens in practically when you don't allow the people to be exposed. And the other thing which this country did was in a graded manner, in a calibrated manner, the people were exposed. And therefore, and while vaccination was going on, and we see that we are one of the kind of very safe society today from a COVID perspective.
Okay, let's talk, Dr. Arora.
Type of virus circulating anywhere in the world.
Okay, let's talk about the nasal vaccine, Bharat Biotech. What is the science behind it, sir, and does it work?
So, first of all, it is a matter of pride that this nasal vaccine, India has succeeded. This is world's first. Although 2 vaccines were simultaneously given within a gap of 24 hours, but actually which has come for community use is the Bharat Biotech's iNCovacc. And the basic philosophy all over the world have a lot of people, more than 20 groups are trying to build this, make this vaccine, but they have not succeeded. This particular vaccine, we have seen the data. It provides a very interesting way of immunization. While it provides in-body immune system is kind of activated. That means there are circulating antibodies as well as T cells and other things. But the entry point is the respiratory system, nose, mouth, and my respiratory system, where it builds like roadblocks. The immune system builds up roadblocks here so that the virus is not allowed to enter so easily into the system. And there are specific antibodies which are secreted into these respiratory tract, and they provide this unique concept. And this is not going to help even only for COVID. All respiratory viruses, infections, this is a platform which will be very useful for many other viral
But sir,
illnesses.
we don't have efficacy data as yet.
See, I must tell you, so we can keep talking about it. At this time, none of the vaccines can have efficacy data because it's an emergency situation. But what we have asked the regulators and the producer that as the vaccine is rolled out, so the study which have been done is bridging study or immunological study, which shows it is compared to a standard vaccine, and here in this case it was compared with Covaxin. But as it is rolled out, simultaneously as phase 4 exercise, efficacy is also to be documented, and I hope that it will be done in a systematic manner, and a year's time we will come back with the efficacy of this vaccine also.
And
none
so,
of the vaccines can have efficacy data at this time.
who should be getting this vaccine, sir?
Anybody above the age of 18 years can get this vaccine. It's very simple. 4 drops in each nostril, total of 0.5 ml is to be administered, and that's it. And it has very little adverse events except some nasal blockage you may get for a short while. Otherwise, whatever the data is, it's extremely safe vaccine.
And sir, it has to be administered by a nurse or a trained person, right? It's not something you take home.
No, it is to be given at, see, one has to be always worried. The question is that with this vaccine, like any other vaccine, we need to wait for 15 to 30 minutes as we were doing it with other vaccines, so that in case there is a reaction, it can be taken care of immediately. Although there were no reports in whatever data we have seen, but one is always as a precautionary measure should be given. But the important point is it's just like oral polio, which you are aware. So as our experience and confidence builds, this will be something which will be very easily administered anywhere in the community, at home and other places, just like polio.
All right. And sir, the price, I know en masse when it's procured by the government, it's less. So will this rollout be free for people beyond a certain age, as we've seen in the past, in government dispensaries?
This question you should ask the health ministry. It's a program issue. I cannot answer this question. The ministry will answer that question. But I can tell you technically this is a very good vaccine. And here I would like to add one additional point, that we have another vaccine, Carbovax, which is also approved for as a precaution or a booster dose. So now we will have a bouquet of vaccines which is heterologous booster, which is considered better than homologous. So bulk of our population has received Covishield and Covaxin. 10% Covaxin, 90% Covishield. Now we have 2 vaccines which are heterologous, and we will be, the community can take either of these, and another 6 weeks or 8 weeks we should have 2 more vaccines.
And so hypothetically, sir, since COVID is now endemic, unfortunately, it's a fact, 6 months later, would people necessarily require another booster of the nasal drop? I mean, is this going to be a part of our lives going forward, is what I'm asking.
So you are asking basically, are we going to need repeated boosters?
Yeah.
That's the question you are asking.
Yeah.
And the scientific answer is that at the moment there is no evidence that further vaccines will be required or not required. Even in countries where people have taken 3 doses and 4 doses and 5 doses of vaccine, particularly these mRNA vaccines in North America and Europe, but they continue to suffer from infection. So the value of vaccine, even in WHO recent review, has not shown any positive benefit out of these.
And yet we are recommending this, sir. Why then are we recommending this?
So we are recommending it as only first booster. We are not recommended. So for example, SOM has received already a precaution dose. It is not recommended for you.
Got it.
If I have already taken a vaccine, no, I will not take it. It is for those who have not yet taken a precaution dose.
What if a person wants to take a second booster? I do.
Well, as far as program is concerned,
is there anything wrong with that? I know it's a fair question. I think a lot of people.
I will tell you. So as part of the program, no, the Covis will not accept a fourth dose. Now let us assume that you want to take another fourth dose. So there is a concept, what is called as antigenic sin. Now this is new emerging, that repeatedly if I am immunizing the person with a particular type of antigen, the body stops responding or responds poorly. And that is given one of the answers, that initially vaccine booster was given with mRNA at 6 months. Later on people are taking at 3 months. But it has not helped too much in that case. So therefore, at the moment, taking another vaccine dose or additional fourth dose, there is no value of that.
And I can't get on Covis. It will not let me do it, right? That
is underlying baseline at the moment.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dr. Arora. Wonderful to speak to you, and so many points over here. Didn't know that I couldn't get an extra dose, but thanks for telling me. Thanks very much indeed. We're going to open up our panel right now. Dr. Raman Ganga Khetkar with us, Dr. Li Mangyan, a Chinese virologist with us, Dr. Louise Blair, and Dr. Isaac Bogoch. Thank you all very much for being with us. Dr. Blair, let me come to you first. Nasal vaccines, we're rolling them out in India for certain groups. You heard what Dr. Arora had to say. He's in charge of the vaccination program at one level. What promise do nasal vaccines hold as booster doses?
Well, the hope is that these nasal vaccines, as your previous guest mentioned, will stop the infection better than vaccines that are administered intramuscularly. So because it's delivered into the nasal passage, the hope is that the antibodies within that nasal passage are primed to respond if there is a new infection. So it could help prevent the initial infection, as well as hopefully the protection from severe diseases received from other vaccinations.
Dr. Bogoch, the fact that you don't have to get a shot, you don't need to get an injection, it obviously means that getting boosted is so much easier. Even though you can't take this home and it has to be administered, but it's much easier, and therefore all across the world the process of boosting people, I presume the numbers would go up substantially.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in all fairness, I think it's important to be excited, but still wait for meaningful data to look at the efficacy and effectiveness of the nasal vaccines. Obviously, they hold promise. We just don't know if they work, and if so, how well they work. So it's exciting times, but I don't want to get too far ahead on this just yet. Having said that, I completely agree. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that there are so many people that have a phobia to needles, and that needles certainly are a barrier to many people getting vaccinated, and that if indeed these nasal vaccines pan out and work, and theoretically they should, we just don't know if they actually do, that will be a significant part of lowering barriers to vaccinations. I will remind people that many parts of the world do have a nasal vaccine for influenza, particularly for young children, and it works mediocre at best. People might debate with me on this fact, but it's actually rather challenging to get a child to take a nasal vaccine. You have to sniff at the same time the vaccine is getting administered, and a lot of the time it just runs down their face and you're not entirely sure how much they get. So there's some practical aspects of this that probably need to be ironed out as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Dr. Li Mangyan, we spoke a couple of days back. Ma'am, is there any further clarity that you're getting on what we are seeing in China? I ask this now because curbs have been removed in China for international travel. People going into China, for example, they've essentially opened up their entire system at a time when they appear to be in trouble. What is the situation as far as the virus now is concerned? The numbers we were talking about a few days back, 1 to 2 million deaths in a finite period of time. Are we scaling down on those numbers?
Thank you. So first, I want to tell people it's very irresponsible for Chinese Communist government to open the border at this moment, because now clearly it's virus tsunami in China. And the worst thing is that more and more healthy adults start to have the pneumonia and also other severe symptoms, and the transmissibility is very high. Symptoms is severe, and also the death toll is still increasing, and in many places in China, they have to build the new crematories. So at this moment, when government doesn't allow people to do the virus examination, don't let people know what variant is circulating, and even the worst thing is we heard a lot of symptomatic patients have got the negative testing result using antigen kits at home. So this made me very worried about the situation. We really don't know what would happen to the world when China reopen. But I want to tell people is don't just contribute it simply to lifting the COVID zero COVID policy or the China vaccine efficiency. It cannot explain all the symptoms happened at the same time, multiple areas all across China like this.
Right. No, it's a huge concern. Dr. Raman Gangakhetkar, as a former head of epidemiology at the Indian Council for Medical Research, what is your sense of what we are seeing now in China and its impact on India? We heard Dr. Arora speak. We know about natural immunity in our country and vaccination. But given the significant rise in numbers in China, air travel is open. Are we likely to see some sort of increase in India in the number of cases, a substantial increase?
It's very difficult to say whether we will see increase in numbers, because one must keep at the back of mind that most of these variants that are coming up are milder in terms of their symptomatology. And what we have seen in Omicron, the number of people who were getting infected actually and the people who were willing to get tested, there was a huge disparity. People never wanted to get tested because it didn't cause any kind of a severe disease, especially among those who were younger ones per se. So it's very difficult to say if the variant does come in India, will we see increase in numbers? Because for increase you need to diagnose, and for diagnosis you need to see that the patients come to you.
Sure.
So that's going to be a bottleneck. Second thing which we have to think about is even if these variants come, the truth is for last 13 months, we have this Omicron, which was first reported in November 2021 in South Africa. Now 13 months have passed by, and there is no new variant which can be called as variant of concern, which is departure from the earlier variants that had come. So unless a new variant that comes, which has increased virulence, either it increases the risk of hospitalization or death, perhaps we will not know whether the numbers are increasing.
Okay.
If the variant is milder, numbers perhaps would be hidden because they are largely either asymptomatic or people don't come forward to test.
Dr. Louise Blair, I think a question which a lot of our viewers would be asking is this: where is the science as far as developing a silver bullet is concerned, a magic vaccine, one that deals with COVID once and for all? Because I do know that there is science underway to getting there. How far off are we?
Yeah, so in terms of vaccines being developed that target different strains, we are seeing that in terms of, we know the mRNA vaccines, bivalent vaccines are available. So looking at targeting the original strain as well as Omicron subvariants. What we're quite a way off of is different coronaviruses, for example. They're very much in the early stage and yet to go through the clinical trials and the data needed to be able to roll out those vaccines. So increasing research needed on broader coronavirus vaccines, but we do have vaccines being developed that target multiple strains at once, which also there is hope that they could also have better protection against new emerging variants. But broad coronavirus vaccines yet to have large clinical trials.
Yeah. Dr. Bogoch, the fact that COVID is now being looked at as being endemic, what does that mean for all of us, all across the world? What does that mean, that we're always going to be at risk of getting seriously ill? Something, we know how bad it can get. Is that what we'll face for the rest of our lives?
Well, hopefully not, obviously, but I still think that some people had this perhaps misperception or misconception that endemic meant that the pandemic was over and that there was nothing left to worry about. All that means is that there's more stable and basal rates of COVID with more predictable waxing and waning of rates in the community. And sadly, that if this is indeed endemic in many parts of the world now, that's not good. We should still be taking steps to protect ourselves, to protect our communities, to create safer indoor spaces, to ensure that this has less of an impact on individuals, on communities, on healthcare systems, because there's still an unacceptable number of deaths related to COVID. I think it's fair to say it's not going away. We know it's not going away, but we can still take additional steps to really ensure that we're just not as significantly impacted by this as we currently are.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. It isn't going away, unfortunately, but there is promise, certainly here in India. There's a sense that the new Bharat Biotech nasal vaccine as a booster dose will work. But I think a couple of important points that Dr. Arora mentioned earlier on, that this is a booster dose for those who haven't been boosted as yet. It's not a booster dose for those who want a second booster. So if you've had a booster dose already, your name will not be on Covis. Your name will be on Covis. You won't be allowed to register for this nasal vaccine, this nasal booster. And as far as the efficacy of the drug is concerned, he says it's being rolled out now and it's too premature to get efficacy data. Safety data is out, but it would take perhaps a year post this rollout to get a real idea of how much and how well it actually works. Pricing details still being worked out, but anybody above the age of 18, if you've not been boosted, can actually get into Covis, the website, the app, register themselves, and then in a short period of time, it should be rolling out soon, get iNCovacc. That's the name of the new Bharat Biotech nasal vaccine. We'll take a short break and we'll come back with something new. We'll come back with a different topic and something which has hurt so many. Why is a free run being given to the hate monger Pragya Thakur? Sharpen your knife, she says. She warns about love jihad. And in language which clearly divides, the Congress party says they're thinking about going to court. Welcome back. The latest hate speech by the BJP leader Pragya Thakur, who has urged the gathering where she was speaking to at least keep a sharp kitchen knife to cut throats and heads of those indulging in love jihad. On the show, why is a free run being given to a hate monger?
इसलिए लव जिहाद करने वालों को लव जिहाद जैसा उत्तर दो। अपनी लड़कियों को सुरक्षित रखो, अपनी लड़कियों को संस्कारित करो, अपने घर में हथियार रखो, कुछ नहीं तो सब्जी काटने वाला चाकू जरा तेज रखो। जब हमारा सब्जी अच्छे से कटेगी तो निश्चित रूप से दुश्मनों के मुंह भी और सिर भी अच्छे से कटेंगे।
Shocking remarks that at a time when the Supreme Court has said that action needs to be taken against hate speech. Joining us now, Dr. Shashi Panja, Cabinet Minister in the Government of West Bengal and a spokesperson of the Trinamool Congress. Geeta Bhatt, Sanjay Jha joins us. Pramila Nasargi of the BJP, and we'll be joined by Dr. Vikram Singh, the former Director General of Police in Uttar Pradesh. In fact, he joins us. Pramila Nasargi, does anything justify these remarks?
I don't agree, See, she is a representative of the parliament. She represents, she must be a role model, and whatever she speaks, she must be very careful. Especially if she is addressing the gathering. The people will always follow the MPs and they believe in their words. I do not think that she has done a talk which should not have been done. I feel that she must apologize and she must withdraw that, and she must tell the people that it was done in maybe under some impression or something, but she must withdraw that. I don't agree with that remarks.
Should the party not have taken action against her, or shouldn't the party be taking action against her? Pramila ji?
That is left to the party. Whatever they take, they may have their own way of telling her. They may issue a show cause notice, or they may call her and warn her. It is their lookout. I am not here to say what they should do, but in fact they should take action. I feel that they must warn her and they must tell her in clearly cut words that you should not have uttered those words. I agree, a knife is there. Why the knife is used for cutting cake. Knife is used for making the bread slices. Knife is used for cutting vegetables. That does not mean that she must advise the people to use the knife for taking action against other person. It may be love jihad or it may be something else. There is a method in madness too. How action to be taken, law will take its own course. They can lodge a complaint and a mistake. But this is not the way to advise people.
Dr. Shashi Panja, is that answer from Pramila ji, who herself is a senior leader of the BJP, an indicator of what the party may be thinking on those remarks?
No, with due respect to Pramila ji, we are actually not convinced by her argument. It's very unfortunate. Even we are elected representatives. An elected, she's a lawmaker. She's a repeated hate monger. And in fact, she is a terror accused. She is out on bail on medical grounds because she probably has cancer or something. And that's why she's out on bail. And she's not supposed to utter these. What is the example that as a lawmaker we are setting for the country? And imagine, as a lawmaker, if I do not have faith in the law of the country, how do you expect the people to have faith in the courts of law or even any kind of legal jurisdiction? It's very unfortunate. But she's a repeated offender. And having said that, BJP in the past, I think even the Prime Minister had once, condemned her statement on Mahatma Gandhi. But even then, after that, what did we see? She got a ticket to stand for MP election from Bhopal. So where were you forgiven? And if you think that we are all going to forgive and forget, I think it is just taking the story too far. It's very unfortunate. And there is no line of defense that anybody can take.
Geeta ji, in October, just 2 months back, the Supreme Court told states, and I quote from their order, their judgment, hate speech is a very serious issue. Treat it as a criminal case. File cases on hate speech without waiting for complaints. Act against those making hate speeches irrespective of religion. Constitution envisages a secular nation and fraternity among citizens, etc., etc. Don't you believe more action should have been taken against her legally?
Vishnuji, thanks for inviting me on your show. And you see, if you look at these words, then definitely, those who are in public life, they have to be very careful when they are addressing a particular issue. But if you look at the context in which these words were being used, I mean, I'm not justifying what has been used, but the context was the brutal murder of Harsha in the month of February. And that too, then a case when there was these, these movements which were going on in the south, and especially in Karnataka, by schoolgirls for wearing of hijab. And when he had put a post on Facebook, which in a way was contrary to that, he was, on this context, Harsha was very brutally murdered. And in fact, the NIA in its charge sheet that it has filed says that it was nothing which was, which just happened. The murder was very well planned and it was a conspiracy. It was in this backdrop, with respect to self-defense, that the issue was being addressed by the member of Parliament.
But this is, you heard the language, it's not language of self-defense. It's language of an eye for an eye, right? It's putting one community against the other. Firstly, we can go into endless arguments on this entire love jihad business. Most people or many people feel that it's just a bogey. But for a minister to act for an MP...
I differ from you. It is not a bogey. Love jihad is something which is, very much real, which happens all around us.
How many numbers, what numbers do you have of love jihad?
We want to close our eyes and pretend that it is not happening. So, the love jihad is a reality.
No, but on what basis do you say that, Geeta ji?
There are innumerable such cases.
How many cases are there, ma'am? In a country as large as ours? Can you give me a number?
There are innumerable numbers.
Where in the NCRB data is there something called love jihad?
4 to 5 cases.
Absolutely.
Yes, it definitely needs to be
Ma'am,
documented, but
Geeta
we come across innumerable such cases are there.
Ma'am, you can say that there are innumerable cases, but I'm asking you, where is the NCRB data?
NCRB data, definitely it needs to be, this issue needs to be addressed by the NCRB, and this kind of a question needs to be needs to be posed and looked into. But the fact is, it is a reality.
Dr. Singh, is it enough for, is it, sure, ma'am, Geeta ji, I get your point.
Okay.
Dr. Singh, do you believe that it's enough for, say, Geeta ji to say or assert that, look, it is happening, let's not be blind to it, or do you believe that it's not happening since data is missing? Where is the data? Isn't that the key issue here?
Vishnuji, this is a very serious matter. Wild allegations do not serve any purpose. If there is a data, and I've been channel after channel, there are only two things that are given. And the Kerala High Court has used the word love jihad. We are using the word love jihad even in your channel. That doesn't mean confirm or contradicts anything. Then they say the Hindu Mahasabha has given a data 451 love jihad. But Hindu Mahasabha, whatever data they may give, is uncorroborated, unproven, and unless it is corroborated by facts and investigation, it cuts no ice anywhere. And therefore, I would say, unless a thing is confirmed, it need not be even mentioned here.
Sanjay Jha, if we get back to Pragya Thakur, the number of times that there have been hate speeches which she has made, it's almost as if she has a free pass. Somebody like Nupur Sharma was ultimately not given a free pass. She was suspended as a spokesperson. Naveen Jindal was suspended as well over remarks on the Prophet. BJP leaders were directed not to comment on religious figures. This became an international issue. It affected our relations with Middle Eastern nations. A police case was filed against her and others for promoting enmity, and yet over here nothing seems to be done. Is it a free pass?
Yeah, Vishnu, let me tell you, first and foremost, where love jihad is concerned, I think it insults the women of this country. It insults the girls of this country whose independent decisions to marry whom they want is now going to be subjected to some kind of an interfaith monitoring. I mean, clearly this is a political game plan, but it is so insulting to women. Can I also be candid on your show?
Yes, of course.
I really admire what Pramila ji has said. You know, she appears to me, I'm first time speaking with her on a TV channel debate, but she seems to belong to the Vajpayee age of the BJP. We are living in the age of Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Amit Shah. And let's call a spade here. It is not enough for us to just indulge in making politically correct statements. Why is Pragya Thakur getting a free pass? You see, when your super bosses make a statement like, we have taught them a lesson, why don't you think Pragya Thakur will actually get some kind of inspirational motivation and encouragement? This is what I call as the dog whistle politics that Mr. Shah and Mr. Modi practice. Tell me one thing, on Bilkis Banu case, and we still have to wait for what the Supreme Court says, Mr. Modi is from Gujarat. It's an absolutely repugnant, reprehensible case where rapists have been released by the Gujarat government. Have you heard a word from the Prime Minister? Tell me one thing.
Let me put that across to Pramila ji. You know, it's wonderful, ma'am, that you don't accept this language of hate and of violence. But don't you believe that senior leaders in your party, including the Prime Minister, should step forward and say this is rubbish, it is intolerable, it's illegal?
It's illegal.
I can't really understand. For every small thing, you want to say Prime Minister must intervene, Home Minister must intervene.
No, but ma'am,
they
is it
won't
a
have
small
any
thing?
other work.
Pramila ji,
they are
is it
there
a small
to govern
thing?
the country, and I'm telling you, I'll just tell you.
Go ahead.
Love jihad is there. It's apparent. Everyone knows that it's going on, but there's a method how to control it. We have been saying, law is there. That does not mean law can be taken by your own hands. It can't. No individual can take the law into their own hands. There is government, there is police, there is a system, and only under that umbrella it must be worked out. You can't say you have a knife and to safeguard yourself, you can always use it.
Pramila ji, what
save your
numbers do you
life,
have?
but not to indulge
Ma'am,
in
you're
these
a lawyer.
activities. Not
And
to
you base
indulge
your
in these
arguments on
activities.
facts, ma'am. You're trained to do that.
Yes.
So I'm asking you, respectfully, what numbers do you have on love jihad in this country, which are substantiated and where there have been convictions in a court of law?
Sir, I am not believing in conviction. I don't think in the present system.
Ma'am, you're a lawyer,
any
ma'am. How
conviction
can you
could be
not
there.
believe in
Evidence
convictions?
will not be there. They will be there. I tell you, I myself had many cases of love jihad, and I had a case from Shivamogga itself. You'll be surprised. A gun was taken away from there, and she was kept in Bangalore in near Munireddypalia in 5th floor. The girl was not able to come over, and one day her mother got a phone call stating that come and rescue me, I am having fever. She was admitted to hospital. They came to me. I had a time to interview the girl. She said, if I take any action, my life is in danger. I can't come out. I can't protect myself. Then I took the note of it and I gave complaint to the concerned police officer.
But ma'am, in interfaith relationships, the scenario you described, ma'am.
This is what is going on. These are so many instances.
No, but Pramila ji, respectfully, in interfaith relationships which have gone wrong, exactly the opposite can happen. It could be a member of another faith who is the attacker and a member of another faith who is suffering. There is no reverse love jihad now, is there?
If it is happening, it will continue to
If there is a crime like this, it is a crime under multiple sections of law.
How to control this?
It's not about religion, it's about a murder, it's about a kidnapping, it's about an attack or an assault on another individual. Why give it a religious spin when you cannot substantiate that with a number or what courts have said in terms of convictions?
Convictions, even in murder cases, how many convictions are there? How many convictions are there? Conviction will be done only given when only legal evidence is tendered before the court.
Right, but ma'am, there is no legal evidence which is given, ma'am. So, I mean, if you are alleging a conspiracy, which is what love jihad is, it is an allegation of a conspiracy and you don't provide the data to the court, how can there be a conviction? Sanjay has a point. Go ahead, Sanjay.
You know, Vishnu,
I'll come to all of you. Sanjay first. Geeta, I'll come to you after that. Geeta ji. Yeah, Sanjay first.
The investigating officer to give.
Yeah.
Half a sec, ma'am. Sanjay ji first, then Geeta ji, and then Dr. Panja. Yes.
Yeah. Vishnu, let me tell you this, that over the last 8 years, and let's call a spade here, we are seeing a progressive polarization in India. The BJP is now blatantly playing identity politics. In no democracy in the world, when there were public calls for genocide of the minorities in a country, would the top leadership remain quiet and pretend as if nothing happened?
No, but Sanjay, I must disagree with you somewhat, because in as much as you can talk about the remarks made by, say, the BJP leader Parvesh Verma, Anurag Thakur, or Nupur Sharma, or Pragya Thakur, what about cases made by others in opposition parties? For example, remarks made by Akbaruddin Owaisi, of Azam Khan, who's been convicted, in fact, for a provocative speech, or Badruddin Ajmal as well. So the language of hate, you know, is split. I'm not saying it's split down the center. I'm saying it's split.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 2 pages of horrible things people have said. Some are Hindu, some are Muslim, some are BJP, some are other parties.
Absolutely. And you know, Vishnu, you have hit the nail on the head. You see, what the BJP does, I'm not trying to at all here, you know, stand to not condemn the horrible statements made by fundamentalists from the Muslim community. But the truth of the matter here is that the Bharatiya Janata Party is in government, right? You have a responsibility because you literally control the political discourse of the country. And end of day for them, identity politics, religious polarization plays into electoral performance. I mean, that is really the modus vivendi for them because it plays into their electoral playbook. And why would, and let me tell you, in no democracy of the world would the prime minister or the political leader be quiet when there is such a flagrant violation of basic, I would say, fundamental rights that a citizen has against hate speech.
Sure.
The Supreme Court comments on it, but the government is silent. What does it tell you?
Geeta ji, you had a point. Go ahead.
Yeah, Vishnu ji, you know, as far as the Bilkis Bano case, I think Mr. Jha, you know, he straight away points a finger to on the Prime Minister, but he is not questioning that why is it that the Supreme Court, you know, Bilkis Bano went to the Supreme Court with the plea, but it was turned down by the Supreme Court. Is it that Supreme Court did it just on, you know, their own, some, you know, whims and fancies, or was it because there was some legal reason behind
the case is pending.
So please let us not try to portray this case in such a manner. Secondly, there are innumerable, since you are asking for that, where are the numbers? Yes, there needs to be a documentation in these numbers, but I very categorically remember that a national shooter named Tara Sardio he was, a man married her on the pretext of being a Hindu, and later on she came to know that he was actually a Muslim, and then it was a very big news, and she actually went to the court.
Ma'am, in a country as large as ours,
it is not just
how
that.
can you
There
say
are
that love jihad is a concerted conspiracy by Muslims among members of the Hindu community?
What about
Interfaith relations can go wrong. Perhaps this was one relationship which went wrong. But the moment you use love jihad, you label an entire community, ma'am. That's the problem.
I am not labeling it. Is free something.
These are all anecdotal examples.
Let me ask, who coined this term love jihad? It was the High Court judge in Kerala, T. Sankaran, who actually, he was the one who actually asked the government to look into this matter, because there were innumerable such cases coming in the state.
And on the basis of that, what has been done, ma'am? How many cases exist right now? All right, fine. Let me ask Dr. Panja that question. Dr. Panja, the definition of love jihad.
Actually, Vishnuji, there are lots of new definitions which are being gradually introduced under the, NDA government. And vigilantism justice is something which they have introduced. And it is like interfering in everybody's lives. And relationships which have gone awry, relationships which have gone bad, have now all been given a communal tone. No wonder there is so much of communal tension, which has almost increased 28% under this government since 2014. So it is as you rightly said, Vishnu Shom, that these are all criminal cases and there is a law for it. But the very fact that the interfaith relationships are deliberately being given a communal, kind of a outlook is very, very unfortunate. And instead of trying to terminate the argument by not justifying what Pragya Thakur said, you are perpetuating it. I mean, Sanjay Jaji, you honestly praised the lady, the lawmaker from Karnataka a bit too early. Because ultimately, they are all believing in the concept of love jihad. I mean, what is this? It's vigilantism justice. I mean, is this the way justice is given, or have they reached a conclusion?
All right. Okay. Last word to Dr. Vikram Singh. So, as a former Director General of Police, if you are given an order or you see an order from a court, the Supreme Court, on hate speech, that action must be taken. Don't wait for complaints. Treat it as a criminal cases. Act against those making hate speeches, irrespective of religion. Isn't it incumbent upon the police to carry out arrests? There's been no action in
Vishnuji, this is not rocket science. Tehseen Poonawala versus Union of India, suo moto action has to be taken, and the law is very simple. 295A of the IPC, 153A of the IPC, 505 of the IPC. If this doesn't work, National Security Act, subsection 1, public order. Where there is a will, there is a way. But if you choose to look the other way, well, this is exactly what we should have been debating. The rule of law is supreme, applicable to all of us, including you, me, and everybody in the country. But yes, show me the man and I'll show you the rules. It doesn't work that way.
I think that's the unfortunate truth. Just one more point as I wrap this up. Here's what the Supreme Court said, and perhaps we need to remind ourselves of this as we discuss these statements of hate. The Constitution envisages a secular nation and fraternity among citizens. There cannot be fraternity unless communities are able to live in harmony. The moment we have statements like this, go brandish a knife which can be used to cut off somebody's head, then how are we doing anything of that sort? And these things keep coming up over and over again. It's sad. We leave this debate over here. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. We'll take this short break. More coming up.